Hello, hello, my fellow sensitive people. It is I, Whimsy, here to deliver a remote from a couple of days ago. I have two remotes. The first remote I did a couple of days ago, and I just wanted to do it to let people know what the long-term strategy is, as I see it from the intelligence agencies, Nancy Pelosi, etc. So I'm just going to tell you the remote and how my brain put the pieces together. All right, so the first thing I did when I went into the remote state a couple of days ago is I focused on Nancy Pelosi to try and figure out what exactly she was doing by holding the articles of impeachment. And obviously, she's been open about the fact that she wants a real trial in the Senate, and there's truth in that. It's also true that she's negotiating with Mitch McConnell. However, while that's the truth, it's not the whole story. And so today we're going to get a little bit more of the story. The first thing when I focus on a remote, when I go into a remote and I focus on someone, I will keep, if I'm on the target, I will keep asking questions. I will keep trying to get deeper and deeper into information from the target. So it looks like what's happening is that Nancy Pelosi and the intelligence agencies have a lot of stuff that they're sitting on. And it's kind of like a poker game where she's holding the cards and then she gets to decide which cards she's going to play. And every time she plays a card, a piece of the defense from the Trump team begins to crumble and his approval rating starts to drop, and you start to see splits and splinters within their coalition, whether it's the Christian community or the military, which is also starting to have issues with the president. So you're starting to see these rifts and tears and splinters in the Republican Party. You have first the old guard Republicans who were the first to leave. Moderate Republicans also followed. Then what was left was the extremist. Then you have, even in the army and in the evangelical community, now you're seeing it being chipped away, and you're also seeing women, it's starting to be chipped away. So even within Trump's base, you're starting to see chips. So if Nancy Pelosi does nothing, if Mitch McConnell does nothing and they simply sit and wait, more and more stuff is going to be dumped until eventually, inevitably, the president will be exposed as a con artist, a crook, a criminal, and a person that was behind everything that's happened, basically. And this puts, the longer that they wait, as more and more information gets leaked, the worse and worse it begins to look in the Senate. And that's because the more foolish the senators look, the more they become laughing stocks of the president, the more ridiculous it looks as they attempt to grapple with supporting a president who has a 42% approval rating, and the less likely it becomes that they're going to be reelected in 2020. So all Nancy Pelosi has to do is hold her cards, refuse to hand everything over to the Senate, and let things slowly leak one domino at a time, letting it fall until eventually the Senate gets to a point where they offer the president the opportunity to resign so that he can be acquitted. If the president can resign before a trial, then theoretically he could get out and not have to face a trial, because at this point the trial is theoretically going to get pretty bad. First off, the dominoes are starting to fall, more stuff is starting to leak. The president's been, he had to pay $2 million because his charity turned out to be a scam. The Christians, as we mentioned, the Christian Evangelical Coalition is starting to collapse. More stuff is coming out about misappropriation of funds, missing funds. more proof that he intentionally blocked funds to the Ukraine in order to meddle with an election, more proof coming out that he meddled in the last election. The only way that they can cover this up at this point, as more and more leaks come out, is to try and get the president to resign so that this trial doesn't happen. Because if the trial happens, by the time it happens, the way that the Democrats want it to happen, it will be devastating for the Republican Party. And so for that reason, all Nancy Pelosi has to do is to hold her hand, hold her cards, and one by one, let the chips fall until the president is up against a corner and doing everything in his power to avoid a Senate trial. And so they kind of gave him Christmas and the holidays to sit and think about his situation. A couple of weeks ago, I had a lucid dream where I was with Donald Trump and I was playing on he let me play at his desk in the White House. And there were some tchotchkes, various different knickknacks and whatnot on his table. And some of them were quite valuable, priceless gold and gems, etc. He let me take everything because he was too depressed. So I took everything. And then in the next dream, we were at what looked like a convention. I assume it was the Republican convention. It was practically empty, and he was sitting in a chair by himself. And I was talking to somebody who wanted to meet him, and I brought him over to meet Donald Trump, and I said, "Don't feel bad. Look," and I pulled out one of the tchotchkes. We've talked about this before, and it said, #1 NBC. And I said, "You were #1 on NBC 3 years in a row." And he said, "Yeah, can I have that one back?" And I gave it to him. But I kept the valuable stuff. So I think energetically, the meaning of that story was the power and the prestige of the presidency is not something that he will take away from his life experiences. I think he's going to get pushed out, and I think that the only thing he has to hold on to is his success as a reality TV star, because he really doesn't have success in anything else. And that's kind of sad, but that's kind of when you go into a dark place with somebody, when you do a remote viewing, you can enter into some very vulnerable, dark corridors, or what the Buddhists call bardos. You can go to very dark places with people, and that's what happened. I went to a very dark place with him. So that he was sitting alone in the Republican convention in an empty room with balloons, and he was sitting in the chair by himself, and there were a couple people setting things up, and the only thing he had to show for his life was that he had been #1 on NBC for 3 years in a row. So the point here is that the evidence that's coming out against Donald Trump and is about to break is devastating, and the only way that probably tapes, probably it has something to do with Roger Stone and some of the other people who have come out and turned state's evidence. There's stuff that's about to leak, and it's quite damning. The final shoe is about to drop, which only places the president in one possible situation, and that is to resign before he's publicly humiliated. Now, when I was meditating on this, I also meditated on Nunez. I'm never going to get the name right. Devin Nunez. And basically, when I tuned into his energy, he had been manipulated. Sometimes this looks like neurolinguistic programming, seduction, hypnosis. It really does look like people become charmed by Donald Trump. But what happened to Nunez was that he was caught by, here's the big thing that I don't know if this will come out. It probably will come out because we found out about it. He was an illegal back channel for foreign operatives. They thought that if Nunez was the one on the phone talking to Russian operatives, that he could be an illegal back channel to the president. So what the president was doing is he was getting back channels to the Russians and other foreign governments, and he was using people as back channels. One of the back channels was Rudy Giuliani, but the other one was Devin Nunez. So it's now going to come out that they found his phone number and they found his information because they had been tracking his phone. And so that is why Devin Nunez is having a meltdown right now. He's having a meltdown because he now realizes that the feds are all over him, and that the only way that his phone, they could have found out what they did about phone calls is if he was under surveillance. And so that is the horrifying, terrifying realization by Nunez, is not only the eyes are open and he now sees what he did, but he also realizes that he's been under surveillance and he's in a lot of serious trouble. So he needs a lawyer, and he's probably going to get one. But it's interesting that it's probably more than him that are back channels to foreign governments, and this is why they're trying to find out and blame Adam Schiff. No, Adam Schiff is behind it. And how did Adam Schiff know? Adam Schiff knew because he was being debriefed by the intelligence agencies along with Nancy Pelosi. And the fact that certain people in DC were back channels to foreign governments is something that came up. And it goes back to the remotes on Robert Mueller, that the real investigation that he was a part of, and he was collecting data that went to existing investigations in the intelligence agencies, and those investigations were following dark money, and it went all the way to powerful business persons and all the way to DC. We talked about that. So that goes back to the remote where Robert Mueller said that he always gets his man, and he made a joke about it. So it's almost as if to say that Robert Mueller has a scientific way of approaching investigations. You collect the data, you squeeze people until eventually you get to the kingpin, and that's what he did. So this leaves the intelligence agencies, Nancy Pelosi, Robert Mueller, in the situation where Nancy Pelosi can basically offer him a deal where he resigns so that he can avoid a trial in the Senate and not be further humiliated. They can get him off federal charges if they do that, if he's acquitted. But they can't guarantee, and they may even be able to help him avoid serious charges in the state if he'll just leave, state charges. However, it's more than one state that he broke the law in. So they're looking at serious crimes that took place in New Jersey, New York, Florida, California, etc. Anywhere there's a Trump property, they're looking at money laundering, etc. The next remote I did was I looked at Donald Trump, and to try and figure out how he was feeling about being in this situation, and he said, "I'll be ruined." So that was what I heard when I went into the remote on Donald Trump. I will be ruined. And so I asked if Donald Trump could tell me a little bit more about why he feels that way now that he's in this situation, now that it's, D-Day for Donald Trump. He said what people don't know is that he took out loans from the mob, and they charged him high interest rates before anybody even knew that he was in trouble. So what happened was he did not go, initially he didn't go to the banks, the Russians directly. He didn't do that. Originally what happened was, according to what Donald Trump said during the remote, is that he couldn't get bank loans, so he moved on to private loans, and those private loans were through the mob, and the mob charged exorbitant amounts of money, and then he also was beholden to the mob. And then because he couldn't pay back those loans, he got deeper into trouble with the mob and with Russia, because he was taking out bigger loans to pay back the loans he had from the mob. So he was, yes, I love you too. Say hi. Hello. So he took out loans from the mob, then he couldn't pay back the mob. So they said, well, we know where you can get some really big money. So that was how it escalated from the mob to the mob. So he borrowed from Peter to pay Paul, basically. And then he talked a little bit about his addictions, women, wheeling and dealing, being the big guy on campus, feeling important, feeling special, the addictive nature of his personality, that he's always talking about how he doesn't drink. But really this comes from a place of addiction. The sad thing about all this, when I closed the remote with Donald Trump, was that he said, I can't pay my loans back. I'm going to lose everything. I'm ruined. So that was the remote. Last night I did a remote on Hillary Clinton. It was the first time I had done a remote on Hillary Clinton, and it was really an interesting opportunity for me to sit in the presence of someone who had a very different cultural upbringing than I have. She spoke a lot about her childhood. She spoke a lot about growing up Methodist. She spoke a lot about how she was comforted by growing up Methodist, about having a Bible, and she was given a Bible when she was a young girl that she still reads it. And she talked about the Methodist being strong pioneer stock, that she comes from people that are very strong and stoic, and life throws things at you. And, whether it's people that were pioneers that died under harsh conditions, the settlers, etc. But it seemed to be the imagery that she was sending me. And so the cultural problem I always had with Hillary Clinton is I didn't understand why she stayed in a relationship with someone like her husband. But what she showed me was the deep historical roots of Pennsylvania, and being a Methodist, and taking it on the chin, and problems in her marriage, or whatever the challenges were. She never turned and ran. She always addressed them, and she tried to address them stoically and courageously. And she was often misunderstood, and there was certainly, she endured a lot of attacks from Putin, Trump, etc. But the point that I took away from that remote, from abiding with her, was this philosophy that you don't give up, and that you bear your lot in life, and you do so stoically, and you just carry on. And it was so foreign to my own cultural background that it was a real honor and a privilege to kind of be in that energy. And it helped me appreciate and better understand her as a person. All right, thanks for watching, everybody, this remote. If you're still trying to get in for a tarot reading or a remote, you can go to tarotwithwhimsy.com. I'll leave the information below, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.